Hello and welcome to today's webcast, brought to you by Fire Engineering and sponsored by Tempest Technology. Today's event, Tactics and Strategies of Ventilation, will be presented by Frank Ricci and PJ Norwood. Frank is a lieutenant for the New Haven Fire Department in Connecticut, and among many other things, he's the host of our Politics and Tactics radio show on Fire Engineering Talk Radio. PJ is a Deputy Chief Training Officer for the East Haven Fire Department, and he hosts the PJ Norwood Show. And both of them are longtime contributors to Fire Engineering magazine. This presentation is both live and interactive, so you can ask questions at any time by clicking on the Ask a Question button in the presentation window. If you're running pop-up blocking software, you'll need to disable it to view the webcast. And it's recommended that you close down all other applications for better performance. This presentation will be available on demand within 24 hours, and we'll send you a reminder email message to everybody who registered. And you'll be able to find it on the homepage at fireengineering.com. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Frank and PJ. Guys.
Welcome. It's an honor to be able to present to you guys. PJ and I are here together. And we're going to be taking a look at ventilation, but we're going to also try to bridge the gap between the science and the practical application. If you're out there right now in the audience and you're under the impression that, the latest scientific data will lead to uncoordinated tactics, standing outside and abandoning victims while the building burns, you're wrong. So we're going to kind of muscle through this, and it's a little bit longer than a normal webcast because it took some time for us to reconcile all this new data to what's going on. PJ.
Thanks, Frank, and thanks, Peter, Fire Engineering, as well as Tempest Technologies for this opportunity today. As Frank and I do with all of our classes, we always like to just start out with a quick shout-out and a thank you to all of our military, both current, active, and also veterans for what they do and have done each and every day, which allows us for this opportunity. Another quick shout-out to all of our faithful listeners. I wanted to congratulate Frank Ricci. Officially today, he was just offered the position as drill master for the City of New Haven, Connecticut Fire Department. So, Frank, congratulations on that promotion. We look forward to becoming a little more official with an upcoming ceremony.
Thanks, PJ. I appreciate that.
Today's title, Bridging the Gap Between Science and Practical Application. This was a challenging webcast for us to put together. Because, as Frank is going to talk about, there's a lot of noise, and there's a lot of things you have to whittle your way through to first understand the science, and that's one of the key parts we're going to talk about today. We're also going to talk about the modern fire environment, and primarily focusing from the 1950s on. Plastics aren't new. We keep hearing this word of new within a lot of this data and information. Well, plastics have been around from the 1950s. We're going to talk about how they're impacting our fire ground today. We're also going to talk about what's old is new. A lot of the tactics that are coming out of the UL studies, you're going to find it's what we've been doing, but now we're putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. Once we understand this science, once we realize how our environment is going to behave today, we realize what's old, what's new, is going to bring us to our size up and applying our tactics on today's fire grounds.
The value of research. It's imperative that we reach out to the communities that we have. I mean, the work that Steve Kerber has done, Dr. David Cohn from Yale, Steve from UL, Dan Mastrikowski from NIST. We have all these resources at our disposal, and if we can reach out with them and try to embrace them, what we're going to find out is that the new understanding isn't as scary as it seems. What we considered as new is based off tactical pieces of the puzzle that have been in practice for years. The latest science just gives us a full picture to link understanding with their improved tactical disposition. So we're going to kind of take you through that, and let's take a look a little bit about the history of the department. When George Washington was a firefighter, pretty much every colonist and political leader, being a member of the fire service was the paramount of social standing. And the goal of the firefighters of the past was to simply save the block. As modern fire equipment advanced, it became to save the building. But now today, we utilize SCBA, and despite that a lot of people think it made our job safer, It didn't. It made us more efficient. It made us more effective. We saved more lives and more property than we could ever have imagined. But we're still, our mission's changed. You know, we're always trying to protect property and protect our citizens, but now we're trying to stop that fire at the room of origin. Separating the noise. PJ and I took the class at FDIC for the NIST and UL study, and they did a phenomenal job. And Speaker George Healy, Battalion Chief from New York City, who's been instrumental, and Steve Kerber has been instrumental in helping us put this together. If you take a look at the slide at the bottom, the white part of the slide, that's a UL or a NIST thing, and the information, it's critical information. But as firefighters, we're sitting in the class and we're going, oh my God, we need to find a way to reconcile this, to kind of break out some of the science and simplify it a little bit. So that's what we're going to really attempt to do here today. This is not a science class. We're going to try to break down the practical application of how we can apply this science without abandoning aggressive tactics and who we are as firefighters.
Absolutely, Frank. And what we also need to understand that we have to recognize when we're talking about ventilation and the effects of ventilation, in previous years, we would assume that ventilation was only when you broke out a window or cut a hole in the roof. However, what we're learning is everything that's done in the fire grounds affects ventilation. Command, search, fire attack, what we do as far as fire ground safety, all adds to the ventilation profile and the ventilation of the building. And that's one of the things that are new, technically speaking, because we never considered forcing the door or attacking the fire with an 1 3/4 hose line was ventilating the structure. However, when we're doing that today, what we've learned from this study is that we are, in essence, creating a flow path and ventilating the structure. Now we're going to talk about some flashover warning signs. High heat, loss of visibility, rollover, turbulent smoke. These are some of the warning signs of flashover. However, what we're finding and what we also already know is with today's technology, with our turnout gear, with the smoke that's being produced today by the plastics and the non-synthetics that are burning in the buildings, you may not see that rollover. You may not feel that high heat buildup because of your gear. The turbulent smoke, you may not be able to visually see that from the inside of the building. So you may really need to rely on your size up of reading the smoke before making entry and looking at your ventilation profile. Why must we coordinate ventilation? Well, there's a study that was completed by NIOSH, and they studied 444 line-of-duty deaths in structure fires. During this study of these 444 line-of-duty deaths, they found that 87% occurred in fires where no recognized or coordinated ventilation had taken place. So are we really learning from these line-of-duty death reports? Almost every firefighter I know is familiar with the LODD reports and will tell you that they utilize them within their firehouses, within their training division to learn from. But when I see a statistic that 87% of these line-of-duty deaths are still not ventilating appropriately, or not coordinating ventilation, there's a problem there. And this is something that Frank and I, as well as UL and NIST, are really looking to effectively change and make a difference.
It's my belief that UL, NIST, and the Yale studies are really going to help us be better firefighters. And again, we had the pieces of the puzzle, hitting it hard, head on, door control, VES, flow path. They're all stuff that we've done individually as individual tactics, but unfortunately, and I think a lot of it goes back to our gear, PJ. I think that our gear has gotten so good that it allowed firefighters to almost take a myopic view of what they're doing. We need to coordinate the fire ground even more and better than we did in the past. See, if you look at how times have changed, if you look at that old, the 1950s type home, and that, PJ made mention, fire engineering actually did articles on, the modern fire environment in the 50s, and I think there's even a couple in the 40s. So it's not new, but that prevalence of plastic and synthetics it's getting more and more. And, your couch today is basically like solid state gasoline when we're looking at the BTU production. Also, if you look at how times have changed, in the 1950s or the 1970s, if you picked up a real estate book and you were looking for a home, the way they would describe that house is they would say how many rooms the house had. If you were at a party and you said, oh, yeah, my house has 7 rooms. But today, the modern-day home, we don't talk like that anymore. We say how many square feet. What's the square feet of our home? So how we think about things have changed. The open floor plan has become king, and there's almost 2 things going on with our economy as the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. The fact is, the upper middle class, we're seeing homes converted now to more open floor plans where it used to be sectioned off. And in the inner cities, what we're seeing in poorer neighborhoods is more modifications that make the building more complicated to figure out and handle the fire.
So another change that has occurred is quicker notification. You know, we don't have to run out to the street corner to pull a box anymore to make the notification of the fire department. Every person in the United States, well, not every person in the United States, but the majority of people have a cell phone that they're connected to each and every day. They don't even need to run to the next room to get the phone that's mounted on the wall any longer. Between wireless technology, building alarm systems, we're finding out we're receiving quicker notification, which we're also seeing flashovers occurring today because of our tactics, because we're getting there so early in these incidents. A fuel-limited fire model. As you look at this picture here, this slide, this is a slide taken from the UL study. This is what the majority of us were all taught when we first started in the fire service. We had our maybe hour, maybe if you were lucky, a 2-hour fire behavior class. You know, you had your ignition, you had your growth phase, you went to the fully developed stage, and then we kind of went down to the decay phase. And that was the fuel-limited fire model. We could still see that today, and we still see that in training. When you have a pile of pallets and a bale of hay burning, the fuel is limited. It's not going to go anywhere. But that's not what we're seeing today. We're seeing a very, very different model, which we're going to show you and we're going to get into within today's fires.
To the fire of yesterday, and ironically, this could be yesterday. Not every fire is going to be fuel limited. You know, we're going to make some minor tactical changes based off this vent profile of what we see. But this is a room and contents fire. I may be controlling my flow path, but I'm not hitting this fire from the outside. So I think we got to be real careful when we digest this study is that we don't just try to make these blanket statements. And one of the most important things that Chief Ted Jarbo from Montgomery County, Maryland taught me when I was in college was that when it comes to the fire service, circumstances dictate action. And that is a phrase that has served me well throughout the fire service. So you really still, size up is still king here. And note that not every fire is going to be ventilation limited. Okay, with the smoke, you know, we said that prevalence of plastics are getting more and more. The smoke in the 70s and the 80s, yes, you still had some of those modern components coming into play, and we see that with cancer rates with older firefighters now. So we don't want to say the smoke wasn't hazardous in your dad's day, but the fact is it was. And as with any fire, you know, take a shower after the job and, you know, everybody wants to look salty, but wash your gear. But it didn't have the amounts of toxins in the smoke that we're seeing in today's fires.
So a couple slides ago, slide 17, we looked at the fire growth model that we have all been taught that are familiar with. However, this fire growth chart has changed because of a ventilation-limited fires, which is what we're seeing today. If you look at today's products of combustion, what people are putting in their homes, as well as, you know, what's one of our goals, all of us as homeowners, to make our homes as energy efficient as possible between our windows, our insulation, our doors, spray foam insulation. We're trying to make our houses as tight as we possibly can. So what are we doing? We're limiting the oxygen supply. We have plenty of fuel. We've already showed you the amount of stuff that we're packing into our homes, so the fuel is there, but we're just not giving it the oxygen. So what happens is you have your ignition phase, and the fire grows pretty much a little faster than what it has in the past, but then it becomes ventilation limited. So what does it need? It needs oxygen. So a window fails. We take a window. We open up the front door. We get a truck company to the roof real quickly. They take out a skylight. What are we doing? We're giving it oxygen. Immediately and extremely fast, that fire is going to grow. It's going to grow exponentially, and it's going to flash over. And that's what we're seeing today.
Another way to look at our vent profile when we're sizing up, if you look at the picture right here under the fire underventilated, years ago you would see fire blowing out a couple windows, but there wouldn't be heavy smoke coming out the doors. Truck companies would make a determination, search is my number one priority, I don't need to get to the roof. But now we look at it and you see that black turbulent smoke coming up. So the fire does need to be ventilated, but that ventilation has to be coordinated.
So today's smoke, as we already mentioned, is nothing more than a chemical cocktail that's superheated fuel. If you take a look at the picture to the left, when I started fire service, the only time I would see smoke like that is when we were going to the local dump where we had a pile of tires that were burning. Yet we're seeing that smoke coming out of today's residential structure fires. And Frank and I like to say it's too rich. Think of it as almost like a hazmat. That smoke there, it's too rich to burn when it's on the interior of that building. However, as soon as it comes out of the building and it meets that right oxygen to fuel mixture, it's going to light up. It's going to light up. And if you see covers of magazines, you see fire engineering articles, what's always at the front door? What's always at the window? Lots of fire, because it's reaching the ideal mixture.
This photograph, this is the actual photograph of what's taking place. It's a little dark, but note that this is a very light smoke condition. And, you know, I was completely guilty of it. If we had a fire on the second floor, I'd mask up on the landing, you know, going right to that second floor because the smoke condition's so light. You put on your mask and you go to work. And I was really surprised when, you know, I had this meter on and the meters were also outside the building at the same time, and the readings correlated that in this light smoke condition, we were over 30 parts per million HCN and over 1,000 parts per million CO. So even when the smoke's not really pushing, we got to realize that we have that chemical cocktail, and we don't want to be breathing in that smoke. Ted Jarbo did a study of 107 autopsies, fire deaths, and he found out that the contributing causes of death in all those autopsies was acrolein, carbon monoxide, hydrogen cyanide, hydrogen chloride, and soot. Soot is a nasty actor because it gets deep into your respiratory tract, so you definitely don't want that soot going in there. But you got to remember, when we're metering these modern fires and we're talking about ventilation, a lot of times people are only looking at carbon monoxide, and now we're moving to look into hydrogen cyanide to determine when our firefighters take off their mask. But the fact is that carbon monoxide and hydrogen cyanide, both of those actors, they don't cause your eyes to water. And every firefighter listening here has been overhauling when the boss said, okay, you can take off your mask, and their eyes are watering. Well, that means you're getting poisoned. So we got to take a look at what's in the environment. And this is something where leadership really comes into play, because I know once we get all hot, we get tired, you know, the inclination is to take off that mask. And, you know, I have that inclination too, and I'm working on it to keep my mask on, because I know as a boss, once I take my mask off, my guys, they're taking their mask off immediately too. So if you're in that leadership position, you got to remember that people are looking to you. So in that light smoke condition, especially in overhaul, make sure you wear your mask, and if you take off your mask and things are still going on, that place needs to be ventilated. All right, let's take a look at the vent profile of this house. Now, remember what I said about years ago, you'd have fire blowing out the windows and the place would be adequately vented. Look at the front door here. This fire is underventilated. Yes, it leaned out and you got the right mixture in that room, but look at the smoke pushing out that front door.
So there's some terminology, some things that we want to introduce you to. You know, we all know what ventilation is. However, there's a key part of the definition now that you need to consider. So we all know ventilation is that systematic removal of heated air and smoke from a structure. But what you need to learn today is when we do that, we're also replacing with fresh air. And that's your flow path. You're letting the heat and the smoke out, but you're also bringing in air. And when we bring in air, what's going to happen? The fire is going to grow. Flow path. The flow path is the movement of heat and smoke from the higher pressure within the fire area towards the lower pressure area through doors, windows, and roof structures. As you can see here by this picture, you have some red arrows and you have some blue arrows. The red arrows is the heat and the smoke is escaping, and the blue is all the fresh air coming into the structure, which is going to feed the fire. Don't throw the baby out in the bathwater. What we want to kind of deliver here and kind of drive home is that just because these tactics, some things, there's new terminology, there's some questionable new tactics, it doesn't mean that they're absolutes. You know, when we start talking about blitz attack and a transitional attack, it's not an absolute, it's not for every fire. Everything that we're going to talk about is for you to add to your toolbox, to add to your knowledge, add to your experience base, to utilize when appropriate. Ventilation-limited fire is a fire in which the heat release rate and fire growth are regulated by the available oxygen within the space. You know, the classic example of a flashover simulator. What do? We go into a flashover simulator and we create a flashover by providing oxygen. It's a ventilation-limited fire by utilizing the fuel of the OS&B until we control the amount of ventilation, and then it flashes. Ventilation-induced flashover. It's a flashover initiated by the introduction of oxygen to a preheated, fuel-rich, which is an oxygen-filled, oxygen-deficient area. You know, take a look at this picture. What do we think just happened? There's probably a ventilation-limited fire, and then, somebody with a hook started taking out windows. Hopefully it wasn't behind the line, and you can see we have 3 windows of good fire going, and we have 1 window off to the right there. There's no fire yet, but we all know what's going to happen in the next picture.
And if you look at the picture good, you'll see that the number 2 window has the window frame pulled out. So, we'll take a stretch here and say Vinny Ventilai here. The fire was probably in that back room, and then they made a determination to vent that wasn't coordinated and started taking out windows. And you can see how he's spreading the fire. Now, I want to put a caveat out there for everything that we do. If you followed me and PJ around with a camera for less than a week, you would find us doing something stupid. The fact of the matter that you're taking this class shows the same thing. We all want to do a little bit better. So we're not throwing rocks at anybody here. We're saying, hey, let's take a look at this, and we can all do better. But it looks like Vinny Ventilai here is burning down the house single-handedly.
Absolutely, Frank. And you know what? When he takes out these windows, what's happening? The smoke is turning into a flame, which can and will result in temperature increases of almost instantly of over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
So basically what you should get out of that picture is if you're the outside vent person, it's okay to leave the fire rich. If you got that black pushing smoke, we want to leave the fire rich. We don't want to be taking windows indiscriminately until the line's in place.
So when we talk about, ventilating the structure and forcing the door and making our fire attack and adding oxygen in, the fire is going to grow, and it's going to grow rapidly. UL, during these studies, proved time and time again that once ventilation takes place, the conditions will change rapidly. And I don't think anybody that's here listening today doesn't believe that and hasn't seen that firsthand. But maybe what we don't realize is when we're operating in a 1-story structure, you have less than 2 minutes, specifically 1 minute and 40 seconds from the time of ventilation until you have untenable conditions. In a 2-story structure, you all found that you have 3 minutes and 20 seconds, so just over 3 minutes from the time somebody takes a window, from the time you open that front door to make entry, or from time that roof is taken, or the window fails, to when you have to bail out of that structure if you're not putting water on the fire.
Now, I want you to remember when you look at this slide and you hear those numbers that, you could have an untenable building before this, and you can have it after. There's going to be many variables on the fire ground that impact this. We're giving you these numbers based off this study as an order of magnitude so that you can kind of put it into your Rolodex in your mind when you're looking at the vent profile, and we're going to try to teach you some tactics on how to control that flow path to buy yourself more time so we can aggressively put out the fire.
Now, we think of those time frames from ventilation to untenable. We have a really good chart here that's going to outline what we're talking about. It takes that slide from earlier, that ventilation-limited fire slide, and actually animates it so you can actually see what's going on here. So we're going to go ahead and launch this video for you. All right, so as you saw there, in a ventilation-limited fire, as soon as we ventilate, that fire, that heat, is going to grow rapidly. You know, and Vinny Don, Chief Don always told us we had that point of no return, that 5 feet that we can make entry into a building. And you know what? If you're on the search, you're search without a hose line, and you hear those windows being taken, and you're going to feel that heat build up quite rapidly. You better be prepared because it's going to get ugly, and it's going to get ugly fast.
We're going to talk about 2 different types of ventilation, venting for fire and venting for life. They've been around for years, and basically this new study is just basically saying that we need to do it better than we've been doing. Because we've all seen people get their first taste of breaking glass, the engine guy that ends up on the truck for the day, and where you end up getting yourself jammed up. So there's 2 things that we really, Battalion Chief Healy from New York City really stressed this when I was talking to him the other day, and I think it's very important. When you're venting for fire, you do not want to break the windows until the line's in place at the seat of the fire. So let me give you an example. You get heavy black smoke and fire coming out the front door. If the crew's hitting the fire going down that hallway to get to the room of origin, you don't want to be breaking windows. You want to wait until they get to the room of origin. So it's not as simple as that they're just flowing water. You want them to be flowing water near the seat of the fire because they're going to utilize that reach of the stream. It doesn't always have to be done by radio. You know, you guys, everybody listening, girls out there, you're all experienced firefighters or you're working with experienced officers. It goes again back to circumstances dictate action and size up. Once you see signs of extinguishment and you know that they're getting the bulk of the fire, then you can start venting windows really close to the fire, and then you want to work your way back from there. Okay, we're going to send a video to show you the type of vent discipline that you're going to have, and this is from Fire Engineering's Tactical Perspectives DVD series. Okay, you saw the company there. They had really good vent discipline. So that means if you're on the outside vent team, I know no one likes standing around with a hook. But the fact of the matter is, if they're stretching in, note that once they open the door, that is ventilation. You can see how that fire was moving from window to window. But once they used the reach of the stream to hit the fire, and that crew outside that was just standing there, once they saw signs of extinguishment, then they took the windows. That's how coordinated ventilation should take place. You got to be thinking to yourself, if you're the outside vent person, that, okay, whatever action I take, what impact is it going to have on the crew inside? Now, in this slide here, let's just move to the engine company. We noted that opening the door is ventilation. So do you think it's a good idea to leave the door wide open while you're preparing to make your stretch in? Of course not. We're going to want to close that door to control the flow path. And essentially, if you break down flow path into just an easier way to remember it, is as the fire is getting more air, you're giving it energy. The more energy it has, the bigger the fire is going to get. So by controlling your ventilation points is going to deny the fire energy. So the move here to make would be to simply shut that door while you're stretching out the line, and then you're going to move in with the line charged. Now, this is a fire that happened the other night in Wallingford, Connecticut, and we were really impressed with their door control. The company moved in, and they closed the door. Now, note, anytime you close a door where a hose line's going through it, the door still has to be chocked because you don't ever want to impede the hose stretching in. We want to facilitate a clean stretch. So you got to make sure that that door's chocked. And I think the best way to do it would be to assign a firefighter to maintain that doorway for the crew. So that firefighter can push line in, assist that crew in facilitating a clean stretch, but also close the door and be the control person to limit the fire spread.
No, Frank, I can't, disagree with you at all. However, when talking to a lot of firefighters in departments like mine where we have such staffing challenges, it's difficult for us to assign somebody to that door position. So we have to look at other ways to accomplish this. Not having staffing is not an excuse, because not having staffing, you're putting people into positions where they're only going to get hurt or worse. So we have to figure out ways. And, Frank, as we get on here, we're going to talk about some of those ways. But one of them right off the top here, you can utilize your RIT crew. Your RIT crew, as long as they can abandon what they're doing to go into a RIT mode, that's something that they can do. So I know a lot of firefighters are very concerned about closing the door behind them. We're always taught, open the door, chock it open, because that was your way out. However, we need to change the way we think and truly control the door.
And as I always say, there's no politician on team that says you can't call for the help that you need to mitigate your fire. The fact is, officers need to step up and realize that their badge should really mean logistics. And if they don't have enough help, they should get enough help there. Because the fact is, everybody wants to go to your fire. So, chiefs, if you're going to be a chief or you're going to be the incident commander, you have to realize that you have to lead. But PJ is right. There are going to be some times where you have limited crew, especially in some of these outlying areas. And there's a way to help mitigate that. It's a current. As silly as that sounds, Tempest, Pathmaster, they sent us this slide that we could use through John Schaefer was kind enough to take the picture for us. But there's a way you can put the curtain. So essentially you can force the door, throw the curtain up there, and the engine company can facilitate a clean stretch. And we didn't talk a lot about Tempest in the beginning, so let me just quickly mention. This is only possible because of Tempest and Colin and Eric Laus and the whole team at Tempest. What really makes the difference about Tempest is when you need something, you can pick up the phone and you can get the president of the company on the phone. So we really appreciate Tempest and their staff and support staff supporting firefighter training. But the curtain is a good idea, especially if you're going to have your WIT personnel be that control firefighter. Now you're only taking him out of the game for a couple seconds so that he can deploy the curtain. And remember, the purpose of the curtain or the purpose for closing that door is very simple. We're controlling the energy to the fire. So that's going to allow us, it's going to buy us more time to make that clean stretch and put out the fire.
You're absolutely right, Frank. The departments that are smaller and have staffing issues, they're not going to be assigned for the door. So Tempest technology and their Pathmaster is something that truly works. Now, if you're going to look at a larger department, such as L.A. County, we have Battalion Chief Derek Alconis to thank for this video. And the things that L.A. is doing in adapting their tactics to today's information is outstanding. And they have some great videos out there. We're going to show you one of their clips now. So we thank Battalion Chief Derek Alconis from the LA County Fire Department and that great video. Now, I know we didn't have the audio on there, but Frank is going to discuss a little about what we actually saw or what you were seeing there during that video.
All right, so the control firefighter, the engine company is stretching in. The control firefighter, the firefighter who's right on the cusp of going into the structure, he's controlling or she's controlling the door, and you can also see they put a hand light there to also mark the exit. But that firefighter is also important on pulling and pushing hose. So I think it's a good practice, and I think that's a practice that fire departments are going to have to start adopting. I mean, it's something that just makes sense. It's a great way to control the energy to the fire, but it's also a great way to get your hose line in place. Having that door outside, that door control firefighter push in hose, is going to make all the difference in the world in getting to the fire.
Absolutely, Frank. And, getting the hose line into position is really going to make all the difference in the world, because if you can get that hose line into position, get it in position rapidly, and put water on the fire, all your problems go away. We're going to take a look at a video here that comes from the Tactical Perspectives of Ventilation DVD series of what happens when you vent behind the line. We're talking about stretching in, controlling the door, but we also want to highlight the point of what truly happens when you have Vinny on the fire ground, Vinny Ventilot, who's arbitrarily taking windows behind the attack crew.
Breaking glass may be fun, but done improperly, it has contributed to firefighters' injuries and death, not to mention losing control of the building. The most common ventilation mistakes are premature ventilation and venting behind the line. These actions have been known to bring on flashover, which can turn a hallway into a blast furnace. This has cut off search teams and rapidly draws the fire down onto the hose team. Remember, this is not the time to crowd the hall. In the modern fire environment, these fire conditions can be masked by dark black smoke. Because of the heat release of today's furnishings, we can no longer vent behind the line and get away with it without injuries or death. Now we are going to cut together both cameras and slow down the footage for you. In this fire, the room of origin was venting out 2 windows and roof operations were underway. Take a look at the smoke layering and the amount of fire brought down on top of the crews. Smoke is nothing more than preheated fuel just waiting for you to make a mistake. If this house was choked with smoke to the floor, the engine company would not have been able to make the seat of the fire and would have been forced out.
You don't have to look at a fire engineering DVD to see that. If you just go on YouTube and you start looking at fires from around the country, you'll see that that's a systemic problem we have in the fire service, is people just indiscriminately venting windows. Remember, if you're venting for fire, that hose line needs to be in place, flowing water, and you want to vent as close to the area of origin as possible, and then you work your way back. We want to keep that fire rich.
Correct, Frank. And stretching that hose line, you have to make sure one of the tactical mistakes that occurs is that you stretch the appropriate hose line. Make sure that if it's a fire that needs a 2.5, that you stretch a 2.5. Don't fall into this role, well, we stretch 1 3/4 on every fire. No, that's unacceptable. You need to do a good size up, look at your building, look at the contents, and stretch the appropriate hose line. And there should never be 1 3/4 going in. I hate to say never, and I know, Frank, you hate when I use the word never, but on commercial structures, it automatically should be 2.5 each and every time.
Again, we look at the production of heat that we're seeing in these fires, and if you're a short-staffed company, then it's up to you as the boss to get on the radio and ask the incident commander and just simply say, Engine 10 to command, I'm going to need an additional company to get my line in place. You know, we don't expect some of these small crews out there to stretch a 2.5 and be able to be effective. You're going to have to marry companies together. And the old adage of you got to get that first line in place is critical. If there's no reason for a company to be spending so much time getting that second line in place when the first line isn't in place. It's one thing if the second due company wants to bring their line to the door or to where they got to go, but then they got to stop and they got to make sure that that first line is advancing. Also, when we're seeing this smoke and this nasty smoke inside the fire, don't look at the PPE in this video, because this video is probably from the 80s or late 70s. So we're just looking at the smoke, and what I want you to look at in this video clip is you'll see that there's a lot of fire upstairs. And basically, what I want you to get out of this is if you take the line and you just kind of snap it around a little bit, shut it down, then as the boss or the nozzle person, take a quick look. Wherever you see that fire come up next, that's going to be your room of origin. So it's a trick of the trade going all the way back to the 70s and 80s. But with proper gear on, you're even going to get a better look. You hit the fire real quick, shut it down, look where the fire is going to appear first, and that's where you want to facilitate that quick stretch, use the reach of the stream, and knock that fire out. Let's take a look at the video.
Are burning. If you don't get there fast enough, you'll be outside looking at the foundation. Only one man can point the nozzle, but it takes a team of firemen to support that point position.
If you get a hold of 61, ask them how they're doing on that second floor of the building on the north.
Okay, so I'm not recommending his tactics there or how long they were playing the line, but simply just get up there, get in there, stay on the stairs, of course, take that quick hit, 5 seconds, as soon as you see that fire knocked down, and then really pay attention to your surroundings. Situational awareness is key here. Again, we talked about getting that line in place, facilitating a clean stretch, and, I never say never, but just as a general rule, you don't ever want to stretch more than 2 hose lines through the same opening. It'd be great if the fire department had something called ladders. But you go to fires across the country and you'll see that you'll have 3 lines, 4 lines going through one opening. It just complicates things. It makes it harder to move the lines. Also, if there's an evacuation, it makes it harder to follow a line out. And you gotta chase the kinks. You shouldn't be walking by kinked hose. Fire flow, gallons per minute is what puts out fire, not just water. We need gallons per minute. So make sure you don't walk by any kinks, and don't put try not ever to put more than 2 lines through the same opening. For commercial structures, we talked a little bit about putting that 2.5 in place. When you have to cut when you have to cut steel doors, or garage doors for that matter, we like to use in New Haven the 3-lock rule. If you just got to pop 2 padlocks to get the door open, then grab the padlocks. Don't even bother cutting the gate. It's quicker to just get the padlocks. This is a storefront here. I believe this is in Camden, New Jersey. Danny Schraden sent me this picture. But you want to just cut the locks and get the door open. If you have to cut the door and you're going to either make a modified cut or you're going to make a large TP cut, what we're recommending now is start off with a very small triangle, just enough to get the nozzle in. Make that cut quick, take a pike pole, smash the glass, and then get the 2.5 playing on the fire while you finish your cuts on the gate to make it a wider opening. And as always, whenever you cut a gate or a door, make sure you pop it open so it's not going to trap your personnel.
Absolutely, Frank. And how does this tie back into ventilation? Because when you open that door, when you cut that hole, you're adding oxygen to that fire. And if you don't get water on that fire, we're going to make the fire worse. We're going to burn the building down, and we're going to hurt, injure, and kill firefighters. So even though we're talking about fire attack, we have to remember everything we do on the fire ground is ventilating the structure. And we have to get water on the fire to take the energy away.
And make sure on a fire like this, or even a house fire on the first floor, there's no reason to be stretching dry into these structures. You're just asking if somebody does something dumb and, doesn't coordinate ventilation, you're only looking to get yourself jammed up. So, make sure you stretch, charge, bleed out the line, and then make that push in. This is a squirrel in my yard. All right. We want to talk just a little bit of the science of size up, because if we don't recognize the vent profile, if we don't recognize what's going on, we're going to make bad decisions. And, I always say, why can't Johnny read the building? And we've been trying to take a little bit deeper look into size up and why individuals miss some key things. What action do you take when you hit the block? Are you slowing down when you hit the fire block so you can get a real good look at what's going on? Or are you worried about getting in there quick? You want to slow down when you hit the fire block. You want to make sure you get look at three sides of the building. And Andy Fredericks, I used to say at FDIC, used to say, when the trash company turns the corner and sees trash, do you think they get excited? So if you're a firefighter and you're responding to a building fire or a house fire, when we turn the corner, we shouldn't be getting excited, So we want to try to control that excitement and kind of put it a little bit into perspective. We got to deal with historic threats, and one of the reasons I really started focusing on size up for ventilation in all fireground tasks is when I have a recruit class in New Haven, and they would enter the fire service at their first or second fire when they would go to a job, and they were inside the building, I'd ask them to describe the building for me. And I never found anybody who could describe the building for me. They would know how many windows fire were coming out of. They would kind of know a general description, but they couldn't even tell you what color the house was. And what I realized is we're not teaching them at that beginning level to really move their focus around and look what's going on. And historically, because, we wear prey at one time for something else, your mind will automatically move to movement because of that flight or fight response. So when you're outside the building, if you're just looking, you're that new kid walking in, you're generally going to focus automatically on that movement of the fire. And that's why they could always say how many windows fire was coming out. Tunnel vision. Under stress, your useful view of vision is going to shrink. Perfect example is I just had it made national news, so I'm sure most people know about it. I had a battalion chief pull a gun on me at work recently, and I couldn't, when I was getting interviewed by the police, I was going back and forth. I wasn't sure what hand he pulled the gun with, but I could tell you what the gun looked like and what the barrel of the gun looked like because I was so focused. My mind immediately focused on that threat, and I think that what happened is when you have that type of adrenaline rush, your pupils are going to dilate and your field of vision shrinks. And the police department has done so much work with this, with shootings, and the fire service has been kind of out. So we want to control our stress, and we want to make sure that we're answering all those important questions on the fire ground so we're making good ventilation decisions. Good. All right. For everybody out there in the audience, how many of you focus on the dot? The other thing the mind and the body's going to do is, besides movement, you're automatically going to focus in on the brightest thing that you're looking at. And then again, it goes back to that experience we're seeing in the field of why everybody can explain where the fire's coming, but they're missing other critical aspects of the vent profile of what the smoke looked like, where the smoke was coming from. So it's important to realize what's going on in your mind, and that experience and training, we can control those natural mind functions to make sure that we do a better job and get a better picture. Radio reports matter. And when I entered the fire service, when PG entered the fire service, they always used to say that your size-up report was for incoming companies. But as fire instructors, we all know that your mind retains things, 30% of what you see, 50% of what you hear and see, and 70% of what we discuss with others. So by giving a good initial size-up report, and all your radio reports for your department should sound the same. Anthony Avila's department in North Hudson, New Jersey, you listen to a fire, besides determining whose voice it is, it pretty much sounds like the same fire because everybody gives the radio transmission the same way. So I think that's important in not missing key elements of what's going on. All right, the coal versus wealth here. Coal was wealth, and John Norman made this popular with his book, bringing the forward of what New York City put as, the 13-point size up. And this is critical, and for our new personnel, we need to even start a little bit less and kind of start building them up. And at the very least, the new personnel should be asking themselves, what's the construction, what's the occupancy, what's the layout, where's the fire going, and where's the flow path. But if we want to hit those 13 critical things, just go back for a second just so they can see it, to the next one, feature, right there. You want to make sure that you hit those 13 things. So that's why the battalion chief, when he gives his full size up, the company officer is going to give a limited size up. Then the battalion chief is going to expand it by moving your focus around the fire ground and, in a sense, kind of doing a checklist and checking off with yourself. Okay, what's the occupancy? What's the construction? Where's the life hazard? What's the vent profile? All of those things are going to come into play, and you're going to give a better size up, but also you're going to make better decisions on the fire ground.
Good, Frank. And, we get the company officer size up, and then we get into the chief officer responsibilities on the fire ground. And we like to talk about in all of our classes regarding controlling the structure. Once that size up is done, the tactics have to be deployed to totally control the structure, which includes fire attack, search, and ventilation, but more importantly, making sure each and every one of those tactics are coordinated, making sure you have your RIP available, and making sure that you have a tactical reserve. And what's your tactical reserve? Well, like you say, it's always better to be looking at them than looking for them. As an incident commander, it's a really lonely spot out in the street knowing you need companies to get some critical job assignments done and having nobody to assign them to. You have to call for mutual aid early. You have to get the companies rolling. You have to decrease that reflex time. Consider front loading. Front load those companies. As soon as you know you're going to work, or it sounds like you're going to work, if you're at a manpower staff challenge department, start those companies and, get them coming early so you're not standing in the street looking for them.
And again, coordinating tactics and controlling the building is nothing new. Tommy Brennan used to write about it in Random Thoughts all the time, is we need to control the building. What we're finding in this 1950s plus fire environment that we're facing now is it's even more important.
It is, Frank. We're going to move right into some truck search stuff and talk about door control. One of the new pieces of things that's coming out is VES, and we're going to get into VES coming up in a few minutes. But what's important to know from here is the truck search and door control go hand in hand, and that's not new. Any good, solid truck company has been controlling the door as they do their search for years. They've been doing it for longer than I've been in the fire service. Vent for life, the old rules do not apply. I was taught in the fire service, when you make entry into a building, you chock the door open, and when you search, what do? You break the windows as you go. So what we have to learn, and we have to understand, if you're in a kitchen or if you're in a living room and you can't shut that door and control that environment, you can't break those windows. If you're in a bedroom or if you're in a smaller room, you can break those windows as long as you can shut that door and isolate that area. So you go into a bedroom, close the door, go ahead, take the window at that point. That's going to give you the lift. It's going to give you the ability to see. It's going to clear out that environment. However, once you now leave that room, you have to shut the door behind you.
All right, so venting for life. Here's the distinct difference. And the fire department gets it with VES and vent, isolate, and search. It seems that we've turned the corner there, but this is where we're really failing. When you're doing a conventional search, why leave the door open, break the windows? Now you're in the flow path, and that flow path can move. UL measured it up to around 15 miles an hour. So That's one of the reasons we see firefighters bailing out windows all the time. If you just simply shut the door when you're conducting your search and you ventilate the windows, you're going to reduce the carbon monoxide, the hydrogen cyanide, the room's going to lift. It's going to facilitate a really good, clean, fast search. Then you go back to the door. If the engine company has got to the main body of fire, and they're applying water, and you can see that things are changing, then you can chalk the door up open to aid in ventilation. If not, you're going to have to leapfrog to another room. And we've been teaching this since 2006. So it's not new, but we need to remember we had the piece of puzzle with ventilation, with VES. Now we just need to apply it with conventional search. And the old way of orientated search, where you have the firefighter standing in the hall or kneeling in the hall with the door open, makes no sense because you're right in that flow path. So we want to be careful how to control that.
Absolutely, Frank. And when we're doing that search, we teach new firefighters, coming into the fire service, how do we teach them to search? They're on their hands and knees, feeling around in front of them, feeling for the wall, feeling for the floors, looking for victims. But yet, a piece of training that we miss is when you're searching, you have to landmark where you are and where the windows are. So how do we do that? We slide the bar or your tool along the wall, feel for your radiators. Your radiators, if you have radiators, if you're up here in New England like we are, the radiators are always on the outside walls. But you have to be searching the wall. You have to run your hand up the wall, 3 feet up on the wall, to find the windows. You can't be hands down, crawling around the room, feeling just in front of you, because you're never going to find the window at that point.
All right, take a look at this fire, and this is a fire on tactics that, Chief Silk and I disagree on. His philosophy is that the truck company's always got to find the fire for the engine company. My philosophy is if the engine company can't find the fire on this fire, they should be fired. The fact is, we got to start looking at, where are people sleeping, where are they in the most danger? And I know that we have the search priorities from the days of old that always say, the fire floor, the floor above, top floor, and then areas in between. But what we did in one of the Yale studies is we determined that if there's an open staircase in the structure, that the second floor is going to be likely worse or as bad as the first floor, because we're trying to save the people from the products of combustion. So when we're making decisions, you need to make good decisions based off the circumstances. And Dr. David Cohen from Yale said, regarding search priorities, conditions on the floor above the fire are at least as adverse as those on the fire floor and likely worse. And again, I want to quantify this, that we're talking about a home with an open floor plan that has an open staircase. And generally, that's most of the fires. That's our bread and butter of what you guys are going to in the field.
That's right, Frank. And when you're doing these searches and you're controlling your ventilation, you have to close the doors. When you close these doors, it creates area of refuge. And if we don't close those doors behind us when we're searching, we're giving it that opportunity for a flow path. And when we're doing our search, it's going to follow us, and it's going to force us to bail out windows, such as the picture here that we took during the building of the Tactical Perspectives DVD series. So now if we look to the picture to the left, look at these 2 apartment doors, both hollow core doors. The door on the left, door number 1, versus door number 2 on the right. Door number 2 is left open. Door number 1 was closed. And as you can see here from the inside, you have to make a determination. Are you going to go into that room and you're going to shut the door behind you? You create that area of refuge, and now you're in room number 1 there. You're in a protected area, a protected environment, versus leaving that door open, putting the chalk in that door and going in and doing the search, and you can see what happens when you leave that door open. Fire is going to come behind you because you created a flow path, and you're going to get yourself hurt.
Last month in East Haven, a plane crashed. East Haven, New Haven responded to the crash, and one of the firefighters got trapped on the 2nd floor, but he closed the door to the room that he was searching in, and that was enough. It was a hollow core door, and it bought enough time for the firefighters on the ground to deploy a ground ladder so that they can get out. So even a hollow core door is going to hold back a lot of fire, and it's going to buy you time. And if we teach firefighters start searching properly, that when they're searching, especially without a line, that they're shutting the door to the room that they're searching, that bedroom, we're going to see less and less firefighters bailing out windows. Because If you close the door, you're going to buy that time so you can get the help that you need. Not in every situation, but in most situations. You know, finding the fire. If you find the fire and you're the truck and you're finding the fire for that engine company, you know, you want to shut the door. You may want to do a quick search, quick hostile search, but you want to shut the door and let the engine company know where it is. Okay? Vincent Dunn taught us that the average firefighter crawls 2.5 feet per second. So that's what set that 5-foot rule for searching a room where flashover is possible. The one problem is, especially when we talked about that flow path being up to 15 miles an hour, is if you get in the room, and especially you're trying to do that aggressive search, you got the chance of missing the doorway on the way back out. So Joe Birchtold from New Jersey actually taught me this, and I kind of taken it, and Anthony and Bill and I just kind of started calling it a hostile search for bedrooms. I mean, for bedrooms that are on fire and also bathrooms that are small where there's limited amount of egress. But if you just hook your foot on the door frame, you're going to get more than 5 feet into the room, or about 5 feet with your swing. You're going to be able to search, and if you got to make the grab, you can make the grab. But if conditions deteriorate, once you get back up in that crawling position, you're right there in control of the door, and you're going to be able to shut the door. The other thing that's very important is to keep the hallway clear. If you're on the truck and you're making a move to close the door, first off, you got to put in your mind that you might not be able to close the door because of debris that's on the floor, or there may not even be a door there and you may not see it. So you got to kind of put that in your mind. But you want to keep your partner back a little bit with the can as you're making that aggressive push to shut that door and do that quick search. That way, if you have to retreat, you're going to be able to retreat. We don't want people standing on staircases, and we don't want people crowding hallways.
Absolutely, Frank. And the next video we're going to show is from Kill the Flashover Project, and we talk about, you know, door control. I know that we're kind of really beating this up and really giving many examples and discussing it in detail, but it's because it's that important. So we're going to take a look at this video, and it's going to show what happens to a bedroom when the door is closed.
Make sure you pay attention to the temperatures, and we really thank Kill the Flashover Project for allowing us to use their video. All right, you saw right there, again, closing the door is closing off energy to the fire. And we have a placeholder here because I'm going to show you another quick video. And this video that you're about to see here, the same exact thing happened, but you get an inside view and an outside view. Notice that the door to the room that's closed is a louver door, and the fire is venting out 2 windows. So by simply closing the door to that room, the truck company was able to choke out the fire. I was on the outside on this particular fire, filming it in an aerial ladder, and I thought somebody put out the fire before I told them to put out the fire. I wasn't happy about it, and then we realized that just by simply shutting the door, they choked it out. So take a look at this clip.
Ventilation is not always about breaking, opening, or cutting things. Sometimes it's just enough to close the door to the fire room. This will deny oxygen, keeping the room rich, and may possibly choke out the fire. Just think what we teach the public about closing the oven door in a stove fire. If you don't choke it out, at the very least, you're going to stall the spread of the fire. This occurred with 2 windows venting fire just by closing the door.
All right, so as we see, closing the door can and will have a drastic effect on fire. It essentially may just choke it out, but it's also going to give you that area of refuge, that area of safety, so you can continue your search, but create a safe area for you and what you need to do. We're going to move right into VES. Now, one of the new terms or technologies, or however you want to look at it with VES is now VEIS. And some of you are saying, oh man, another damn letter and an acronym. Is this new? No, it's not new. Any solid truck company or any firefighter that has been taught the right way to perform VES has been performing VEIS all along. However, we still need to teach it with the I in, because we really need to enforce the piece of the puzzle, which is flow path, into VES to make sure that we're keeping our firefighters safe. So one of the important things with VES, or excuse me, VEIS, it's still new for all of us, is making sure that we really sweep the floor before we sound it. So you go up to that window, you take the window, and now you're going to enter. You have to sweep that floor below, because where are a lot of our victims found? They're found right underneath that window. So we have to make sure that we sweep the floor so we don't injure anybody. We have a quick little video that we took here, again in our DVD series, which we want you to see the effects of not doing it properly. All right, good. So now we saw the importance of sweeping the floor before we sound the floor. And, you know, it was the same type of year we did that. We just used a pumpkin and a mannequin to highlight the bad effects that will happen if somebody's underneath there and gets hit with your tool.
Yeah, you don't want to take a rescue and turn it into a recovery. You know, your best day of being a firefighter could turn into your worst by just simply doing that tactic wrong. But the key is you got to close the door. Even if you find the victim first, you still got to continue to close the door, because it's not like movies. It's going to be extremely labor-intensive to move that victim out the window. You created the flow path. You shut that door, go past the victim, shut the door. Now you're going to have that time to remove the victim, and you're going to be controlling the flow path.
So it's just a couple more pictures. Where are we here? Oh, right there. We're jumping here. Right there. Okay, good. A couple different pictures are showing, you know, sweeping the floor, sounding the floor. And you have to remember that sounding the floor may not indicate the integrity of the floor. You may have fire below that floor, and one thing that has been missed, and you know, one thing that Frank and I keep talking about, is there's a lot of good things that are coming out of these studies from across the country, but too often, really important pieces are missed upon. And Frank, why don't you talk about the piece that was missed from the Chicago study when we start talking VES and sounding the floor?
Yeah, there's 2 things that came out of the Chicago study that I think are vital. And, I thank Steve Kerber and the Chicago Fire Department for putting it together. But there's 2 things that I separated out of the noise, was that sounding the floor may not truly indicate how stable the floor assembly is. And even more importantly is that if you have a thermal imaging camera, now I've seen it in the city where you go into an apartment and you can see the nails coming out in the hardwood floor, indicating that you got a fire below you. But what they found in this study was that if you look at the 2 pictures above, there's the thermal imaging camera picture. You could only way you could see that there's a rock and fire in the basement is along the baseboard. The carpet doesn't show any signature, so heat signature. So the carpet was 73 degrees on top, but the basement was over 1,200 degrees. So you can't always rely on technology. And this is the real reason why PJ and I decided to kind of try to break this out into the practical application, because as I go around the country, this information should be old, and I'm seeing people in classes saying they didn't know that. They thought that the thermal imaging camera would pick up a fire below a carpet every time. And so I think that's important for instructors out there, you know, especially at FDIC and teaching around the country, is, you know, even if you have your canned program, take some to look at these studies and see where things fit into your program that you can add in. But we need to get the word out. We need to separate the noise, and everybody needs to start teaching this stuff.
Thanks, Frank. And, you know, one of the things when we get back to VES is how are we entering the building? How are we going to enter that window? And there's always, obviously, with every tactic, there's some controversy. And more specifically for VEIS, are we entering through the window head first, or are we entering straddling the window? You know what, quite frankly, I really don't care how you do it, as long as you're trained in that tactic and you can do it efficiently, effectively, and quickly, so you can get into that room, get across the room, shut the door, then do an effective search. You see that in this picture, it's just showing the two ways to enter, and that red line is indicating your windowsill line. You know, one of the things that you need to consider is when you're determining which way you're going to make entry and how you're going to train and be prepared is think about the temperatures. The higher or closer to the ceiling you get, or the farther away from the windowsill you get, the higher the temperature is going to be. And the higher the temperature is going to be, the more uncomfortable it may be to you, and the more burns or injuries that you may take. So you have to think about it, you have to prepare, and you have to train.
For the action position, I like personally bellying in. Once you clear that, you make that window into a door. You completely clear it. If you belly in, you're automatically in the action position. You're already in that crawling position. You got good balance, and you can make your way to shut the door. And you're out of the flow path.
I agree with Frank. When I teach VEIS, that's how I teach my guys to go, is through the head first, belly in position, the action position. But I do know there are a lot of guys that disagree with that. So, again, I don't care which way they do it, as long as they get in and get the tactic done. However, we do advocate that action position going in head first. So once we get into that room, right, our number one goal at this point is to shut the door. Even if you know you have a victim in that room, you want to get across the room and shut the door. And this is one of the searches that I'll advocate, that you don't have to do a right-handed search or a left-handed search and follow that wall. If you can see across the room, or if you can see the door, if you're pretty sure you know where it is, you need to make a beeline directly across that room and shut the door. However, when you go in that window and you're in the action position, you hit the floor and it's blacked out, lights out condition, you can't see your hands in front of your face, and you have no idea where that wall is. Now you have to make a decision. Are you going left or are you going right? Left-handed search, right-handed search. And you know what? There's no absolutes on which is going to be the quickest or the fastest way to the door. However, 9 out of 10 times, and ask the guys or girls that you work with, or think of the bedroom that you sleep in every night. If you come in the window and you search away from the outside corner, that should bring you to the door 9 out of 10 times faster than if you search the opposite way. So let me say that again. When you come in that window, go away from the outside corner, and that 9 out of 10 times will bring you to the door faster. It's not an absolute, but in a lights-out condition, I want to take a gamble with the quickest and fastest way to that door.
Now, note, this trick only works if it's a corner bedroom. So in a corner bedroom, you move away from the outside corner. I have yet to find a house where this doesn't work in, or an apartment building, but it's got to be the corner bedroom. Now, if you work in the Republican ghetto, the difference to the door may be 12 feet. If you're in a small town or a city, the difference to the door, or small homes, it may only be 1 or 2 feet. But that 1 or 2 feet might make the difference between you closing the door and facilitating a clean search of that room, or getting pushed out. So remember, take a look tonight when you go home, or when you're in your bedroom, and look at the corner. We're going to show you a video clip, and this is from Indianapolis, and this was a little bit controversy, but I think the guy did a great job here. And what they do is they get a report that somebody's trapped in this room. They make the call. Now that we know about flow path, when you want to talk about general rules, about VES, there's that discussion going on in the country now with should you take the window out with the ladder, or should you climb up, and vent the window with the axe? These are just my thoughts on it. If the fire's only 1 story above you and you're going to be ES, then I would take the window out with the ladder, but my mask, I'd already be breathing air. If it's on the floor above, so you got to go 2 stories, well, then you're going to have to climb up, and you're going to have to break the window and go in and make the beeline for the door. Because if you vent with the ladder, it's going to take you too long to get up top, to get in that flow path is going to kind of take over. But let's take a look at this video, and there's 2 things I want you to look for. One, this captain, he was unable to shut the door, but it was a high risk, but for a high reward because somebody was trapped in there, and he gets pushed out. And I want you to watch and see how his gear off-gasses. But I'm not even throwing a rock on this. I think they made the right call on this, on going in and being ES in the room. Just unfortunately, he made it to the door, but because of debris, he was unable to close the door. She said it smells too. Okay, as you saw, the firefighter or captain was unable to close the door, and his gear was superheated. That's that off-gassing thing. This is the fire environment that we're facing nowadays. This picture here is one of the chief officers in Ansonia they didn't close the door to the room, and they got pushed out. His gear was off-gassing. Now, there's a natural inclination that individuals on the fire ground, they're going to want to put a hose line on you. That's the worst possible thing that you can do. The 2 things you don't want to do with gear that's off-gassing, that's hot. Remember your flashover training. Don't lean against the wall. Don't touch the guy in front of you. It's the same thing. Your gear, you don't want to compress your gear, and you can compress it by your hands, or you can compress it with water will act and take away that thermal layering. So the important thing to remember here is, yeah, if you find a firefighter in a superheated environment and you have to pull them out and you have to manhandle them, that's our job. But once you get them outside, you want to peel away the gear. PJ, you want to just talk real quick about the 3 layers of the gear?
Yeah, you know, Frank, you have to go right back to the basics of your turnout gear and how is it designed to work and to protect you. It's designed with the 3 layers to work together, to trap the heat, to reflect the heat, to keep the heat off you, but also to trap pockets of air in between the layers that are also going to protect you. So if you have this trapped superheated heat or superheated air in between these layers, and you're going to compress the gear by touching somebody, putting your hand on their shoulder like the picture shows, putting your hands on the back, that's going to compress the heat and transfer that heat directly onto your brother or sister. And you know what? This is going to be the result.
You know, nobody wants to get burned, and we appreciate Brian Windsor from FDNY who got burned in his volunteer company in Long Island for allowing us to use the picture, because I think it's important and it kind of brings it home and it kind of makes you think it can happen to you. Here, guys thought he was going to get hurt in New York City, and, you know, we all work in a dangerous job. Whether you're paid or volunteer, we're all professionals, and the fact is that any call you can get yourself jammed up on, so it's very important. I was also told, Peter let me know through the computer that that one video was small. We'll make sure in the archive version of this that it comes up to full length. Okay. All right, now, I already got a question about, well, why didn't you just hit the fire from the outside when I showed you the slide about yesterday's fire? And we're going to talk about that, and there's not one size fits all. if the one thing I can break down from this scientific thing is that I don't want you guys doing, and girls, is going out and hitting every fire from the outside with a line. I think you do a disservice to the fire department. You got to look at what's going on. And the reason I say that all this stuff isn't new is hitting it hard from the yard. It's not new. Yes, we were all taught to fight the fire from the unburned side, but FDNY, New Haven, DC, LA, if fire's blowing out the front door a year ago, 2 years ago, we were hitting it hard from the yard and making that aggressive push in. Now, if you look at this picture, and I talked to this with Chief Healy about this, and he wanted to make sure that I really pointed this out. He goes, oh, the firefighter waited a little bit too long to open the line. And in most cases, he's right. However, in this case, the eaves were completely on fire, and this is Chris Pepler in this photo. And if you look at the video where this picture came from, you'll see that he uses the reach of the stream. He rakes the eaves. As he's raking the eaves, the boss, the officer, Jim Duffy, takes a quick look below the smoke, try to get the layout of the room, see if there's any victims, and he keeps that line open, and he's moving, and he's pushing that fire back. So remember, ventilation moves fire, water does not. And I think that this tactic being done for years and years in all these cities has proven that, but here we had a piece of the puzzle. We didn't have the whole piece of the puzzle. Now, individuals in class would say, well, why didn't you go around back? Why didn't you go around back? And I usually say in my city because I probably get mugged. But the fact of the matter is, to go around back, that fire is still getting energy. The fire is still getting bigger that's coming out that front door. You're going to have to fake out a dog. You're going to have to break down a fence, go around cars. Remember, energy is the enemy here. And by going around back, the fire is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's why hitting it from the outside doesn't work all the time. Because if the fire's in the back of the house, by the time you stretch around to the back of the house and give it that quick hit on an exaggerated angle, you're losing valuable time. Someone still needs to go in and put out that fire. So you want to make that quick hit from the outside. If it's blowing out the front door, get in there and put out the fire. Remember, think about like the last 2-alarm fire you've been to. You're putting water in from the outside, but this thing's still burning. Why? Because you're not hitting the seat of the fire. Fire's still burning in the voids. So we want to make sure that we still get in and put out that fire.
So, Frank, we're going to talk a little about defensive versus offensive attack. And there's been a lot of controversy over the last couple of years since this information came out, and we talk about transitional attack and blitz attack and hitting it hard for the yard. You know, I was watching some a training video from Dan Majkowski from NIPS recently. He said something that really hit home to me, and then I looked back at some of the stuff that Steve Kerber said, and they're saying the exact same thing, and it really makes sense. Why do we dictate offensive versus defensive by where we're flowing water from? Why do we find a tactic by where we're flowing water from? If we should be defining the tactic by if we're moving forward and if we're advancing on that fire, it's an offensive attack. Regardless if you put 10 seconds of water in through the window and then you move into that building, that's still an offensive attack. Defensive is when you're setting up ground monitors, you're setting up aerial devices, and you're standing in one position flowing thousands of gallons of water into the building. That's a defensive attack. But just because hitting it, you're going to flow water in from the outside, like hitting it hard from the yard, that's still an offensive attack. Again, not for every fire. And I'm not telling you every time you roll up on a fire you should be throwing water in from the outside, but it shouldn't be something that we're afraid of doing or that we should be turning our nose up because we're firemen. We got to get in there and put the fire out. Yes, but you got to take the energy out of it as well. When you're concerning or thinking about offensive versus defensive, you always have to remember what Al Brunicini said, is you never want to order artillery on yourself. Now, I know I'm messing it up on how I'm actually saying it, but you can't combine the two. If you're offensive, you're offensive. If you're defensive, you're defensive. Don't ever allow companies inside a building to get hit with a hose stream or hit with parts of the building. It's just going to make some injuries. All right, so UL and NIPS also only found a 10-degree increase and found no movement of fire. So what are they saying? That water does not push fire. Now, there's been a lot of firemen, including myself, that said, no, that can't be right. Of course, you always fight the fire from the unburned to the burn, because if we don't, we're going to push the fire throughout the structure. However, they're proving me wrong. They're proving all of us wrong, that In fact, water does not push fire. Will you have an increase of heat? Yes. In some of the studies, they found a 10 or 15 degree increase of heat. You'll move debris, you'll increase temperatures, but what happens is your turnout gear is already saturated between water and sweat, and that 10-degree increase makes it feel like a 50-degree increase. So we're not pushing fire. We're increasing temperatures a little bit, but we are not pushing fire. During the filming of the Tactical Perspectives DVD series, we were able to show this debris moving through water application. But it clearly shows that we didn't push fire. We went back and, to these video clips, and we found that, wow, they're right. And we didn't realize that we captured this originally, but water doesn't push fire. It will move some heat and move debris, but it's not going to move the fire. And this video clip is going to show and demonstrate that for you. Let me see.
So the heat increase at 10 degrees, remember, if you're on the inside and somebody puts a master stream from the outside in, it's going to disrupt that thermal balance. But they're saying that from the study that they only saw a 10-degree heat increase. That's going to feel like the sky's falling if you're on the inside, especially when all the debris comes. You're going to lose visibility and you're disrupting that thermal balance. But the key to the game is to not combine the two attacks, and nobody wants to get hit by a master stream because that alone can injure you. And this guy volunteered from Turkey to demonstrate the power of a master stream here for you. As you've seen there, that guy died, and God rest his soul. But the fact of the matter is, you're hitting somebody with a powerful stream. You're going to do some damage to him. So we want to make sure that everybody understands that you don't combine offensive and defensive attack. Even if you're not pushing the fire, you don't want to be sending streams through a window to the crews operating on the inside. If you're going to hit it quick from outside for that 10 seconds at an exaggerated angle and make the push in, that maybe the circumstances dictate that, but maybe the circumstances dictate that you just control the flow path and you go in and make that aggressive push and put out the fire. I had a question about a previous slide of, say, where you had fire blowing out one window, you had hardly any smoke coming out the front door. They said, well, why would you waste time forcing entry? Why wouldn't you just hit it from the outside? And again, this is a judgment call, but as the boss pulling up to that fire doesn't have the energy. It's not fuel. It's not limited at that point in time. I need to get in there. I'm going to have to force entry anyway. I need to find out where the victims are. I need to get that hose line in place. So to me, in my call on that particular fire, it's going to take you longer. You're actually going to do more harm by stretching a line, trying to hit the fire from the outside, and then going in, instead of just forcing the door open, controlling the flow path, making that aggressive push, and putting out the fire. So not every circumstances that you're going to be faced is going to tell you that you have to pull water from the outside, because I think that that's going to be a disservice to the fire service if people try to adopt that. What we're going to do in that case is we are going to lose more victims, and we are going to burn down more homes because they're going to make it an outside attack instead of that quick hit and moving in. So you got to, circumstances dictate action.
Absolutely, Frank. And those circumstances are going to be different for each and every department. If you're rolling up and your first due, you have 10, 15, or 20 members first due on that fire, tactics are going to be different than if you're rolling up with 5, 6, or maybe even 2 firefighters. So you have to look at the resources that you have available, the resource that you currently have on scene, and what is the appropriate and best tactic to deploy.
All right, so we're talking about the blitz attack, and you'll see the top of the slide, no, we're just living together, because this is my city, and if you went in any firehouse, even today, hopefully as drill master I'll be able to help bring us along, but if you went into any firehouse today in the city and you asked if New Haven does a transitional attack, they would all say no. I don't think you'd find one person that says that they do it. And again, circumstances dictate action. On a fire like this is where you're going to have to hit it hard for that 15 seconds to make that aggressive push inside. Go to the next slide, PJ. All right, you can see here the chief ordered the deck gun from the engine to be utilized at an exaggerated angle for 10 to 15 seconds just to knock down that body of fire on the porches. While this is occurring, the other engine company is making that hard stretch in. They're not combining the attacks. Once that engine company hits that front door, they shut down the outside stream, and they're going in to make the attack. But it's kind of like when you know somebody when they don't want to get married, and they say, oh, no, we're just living together. It's like that. A lot of fire departments have been utilizing the blitz attack because circumstances dictated that they had no other choice, but they're not saying it's a transitional attack when really it is a transitional attack. So don't get so caught up in the terminology and look at what's going on. Another life experience that we just had in New Haven, on Pendleton Street, the members pulled up to this job. You could see this thing is well involved. The officer pulled a 2.5 and did a quick knockdown from outside, and none of the fire was pushed through the houses. As a matter of fact, 5 victims were rescued by ladder by our truck companies. So the proof's in the pudding. There's a lot of people out there saying, well, UL was only in a room and contents fire, and so maybe it's not the full picture. But if you look in the experience in your own department, I mean, this fire just happened a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, you're going to find that the tactic of hitting it hard from the yard for that 10 to 15 seconds on an exaggerated angle is going to make a difference in controlling the fire and saving lives.
In fact, we're going to move over to some vertical ventilation. And one question that continues to be raised is there still a place in the fire ground for vertical ventilation? Can we still perform vertical ventilation on today's fires? And my answer, pretty straightforward, yes. There still is a place for vertical ventilation. However, there are some rules. There are some cautions. There are some things that you must know and also must do. You must know the construction, and you also must know the fire and the heat's location. Where is the fire and where is it going? But also, what the building construction being, excuse me, I lost my train of thought there. How is the building construction going to be affected from the heat that's being built up by that fire? So when you go to the roof, you have to have some travel plans. You have to know where you're going, and you have to walk the strong areas of the roof. You know, you also have to sound your path of travel. And I'll see it, and you'll see it, and you've done it. You get off the ground ladder, you sound the roof, you pick your point where you're going to open up the roof, and you sound the roof all the way to that spot. But how many times did you sound the roof back to the ground ladder? You see it all the time. We see it in every fire ground. So you have to sound the roof from point A to point B, and also back towards your egress when you're coming off the roof. And I know this one, you see it in all the textbooks, keep the wind at your back. That's an ideal situation. Unfortunately, we're not dealing with ideal conditions when you're up on the roof. If you have the opportunity to keep the wind at your back, absolutely you do. However, it's more important that you get the hole open quickly and effectively while coordinating those tactics with the engine company than worrying about the wind at your back. Because as good, solid firefighters, when you're on the roof, you're going to have your SCBA on. So it's not necessarily as important to make sure the smoke is blowing away from you. So we get into where do we cut the hole, right? How do we make that determination? And this is always a challenge, especially when we're talking with today's new construction on, well, how long do we have? We put our members up there, and where should we cut that hole? You know, it's always been taught to us the highest point possible over the fire. Well, we may not be able to cut directly over the fire in some of today's new building construction, but you have to do the best job that you can, making sure that you do cut as high as possible and get as close to over the fire as possible. And how do we determine that? There are some tools that we have. We have our thermal imager. Thermal imager should be brought to the roof so you can help determine where the fire and where that heat is. But also some visual assessments, melting or bubbling tar, melting snow, a dry spot, shingles curling, are all some visual clues of your visual assessment on where the fire and their heat is. If you have venting fire out of the roof already, leave the roof alone. It's already burning through. By the time you get up there, you deploy your equipment, your tools, your personnel, it's already venting itself. Did you go back one slide?
Okay, as you've seen here, their hole's in a good spot. They may have gave up for maybe a couple feet, but you can see the snow isn't even melted where it's blowing out. So that right there is your vent point ignition. That right there is the smoke lighting up, the fire getting leaner in that flow path. So they cut the hole right over the fire in this. And remember, ventilation moves fire, water doesn't. So they're keeping that fire there as long as the hose line's in place. Next slide. If you look at the picture on this slide, they cut the hole in the wrong place. Look where the fire was. The fire was in the back of the building. You can see where the window was. They cut the hole in the front. So what that's going to do is it's going to draw the fire to the front. Now, there may be some circumstances where, especially if you have like that New England-style 12-pitch roof, where you may give up 5 feet of real estate to cut the hole on the dormer. You know, those are all going to go into your tactical decision-making. But we want to get the hole over the fire. And one of the things that we did learn from the UL study that I'm trying to change with my personnel is when they cut the hole, say if the fire's on the first floor of a 2-story single-family home, when you cut the hole, you don't want to push down the ceiling until that line's in place, and that line's hitting the main body of the fire. So normally we would cut the hole, push down the ceiling, and, you know, it's off to the races. But now we're going to want to coordinate even our roof ventilation. You can cut the top hole uncoordinated, but don't push the ceiling down until that line's in place and you see some signs of extinguishment.
Coordinating your tactics. It's very important at today's fire grounds. You know, one of the questions that I always, you know, get in ventilation training classes is, you know, how do we train for ventilation? We don't have any vacant structures. You know, we can only cut up pallets and some plywood, you know, so much, and we're really not learning anything from there. One of the biggest things of ventilation is coordination and communicating with your engine companies and timing. So what I challenge you to do is you don't have to just break stuff or cut stuff to train for ventilation. Train on getting to the roof, assembling your personnel, the equipment, and how long is it going to get you to that roof. Get your company all geared up. Sit in the firehouse. Put them in the engine, or the truck, pull out in front of the firehouse, put in the park, and say go with a stopwatch. See how long it takes your company to get to the roof with all the tools that they need. Pull it down, put the truck back in, do it again. If you can decrease your timing to get to the roof, you're going to be doing a better, effective job of ventilation in the fire ground. So you don't have to just break stuff or cut stuff. You could also train on your timing of how long it takes you to get to the roof and work on decreasing that time.
Okay, the training of roof operations, it's critical to understand that if you're waiting to get the roof until you realize that you need to get the roof, you're already behind the 8 ball. Getting to the roof is a 7 to 10 minute tactic. So especially in these smaller departments, it's important that you utilize the radio and get a company there and make sure you can coordinate ventilation and make sure that roof ventilation isn't an afterthought. You got to realize it takes time to get the hole in the roof. Also, don't just cut this huge hole up there. You know, we want a big hole. Yes, you want one bigger hole is better than a lot of small holes. But cut 3 bays. Then determine if they're extinguishing the fire. If they're extinguishing the fire, then you can drop the ceiling. Then you can expand your hole. But at least get 3 bays open. And a bay is each individual space between the rafters.
So one of the issues some departments have when they're talking, you know, limited staff departments is, how are we going to get the tools that we need to the roof? We need all these tools. Well, first of all, what do you actually need and what don't you need? And that comes from your size up. Making sure you do a good solid size up of what the roof material is. And that can be done in some of your pre-planning and prior to the incident. But you show up at this building, you have to determine what do you actually need. And you know what? What do you bring? Well, you have to have a portable radio. You have to have a way to create the hole, whether it's a Tempest chainsaw, a Tempest rotary saw, or whether it's an axe. You have to have a way to create that hole. And you also need some type of tool like a hook to push the ceiling down. So you have to look at the building construction. You have to look at what you have to breach or cut through. And then you need to make a determination of what you're going to bring. And you know what? I know Tempest is sponsoring this webcast today, so I always want you to bring a Tempest saw up with you, but bring an axe with you. Always have that axe as a backup, because if you didn't do the appropriate maintenance and take care of your good quality equipment that you have from Tempest, you know that the axe is always going to start. You know, one way to get these tools up there is marrying tools together. There's some great websites out there, including vententersearch.com, which had all these pictures on there that we utilize on marrying tools together. And you know what? A hook. Simply mounting a hook inside the roof ladder, like the picture on the bottom left shows, really puts the hook where you need it. And now you don't have to carry it to the roof. So that goes back to the training on getting to the roof and your timing, and what can you do to decrease the amount of time that it takes you to get yourself and all the tools that you need to the roof. You can't forget saw safety. You know, depth gauges. Let's talk about that first. Notice the last bullet point. The depth gauges are on the saws for a reason. If you're not on a roof each and every day cutting a roof with a saw, you're not going to know where the rafters are. With the powerful saws and the chains that we're putting on them, you're going to cut right through these rafters and you may not even know it. So use a depth gauge. It doesn't make you any less of a roof guy. It doesn't make you any less of a firefighter. It means that you're using the tools the way they're designed to make your job better and safer.
In training, though, I want you to, we'll take something from EMS here. Look, listen, and feel. That saw is talking to you, and you just got to open up your mind and actually hear it talking. You'll know what it's cutting through by listening to the saw and the feel of the saw, but that comes with experience. And I was on a truck company, I never used to use the depth gauge. I used to throw it off the roof, and then it was like Easter. I would search for it after the fire and hope I could find my Easter egg. Hopefully I could find it. But, there's nothing wrong with using them, but sometimes they're a hindrance. So, again, it's going to go down to your experience level on the roof and cutting, but it is a nice tool to have.
When you're using a rotary saw, different from the chainsaw where you don't have that brake to stop the chain or stop the blade from spinning. So roll it to your location like a wheelbarrow or deaden the blade into the roof material before you pick it up and remove it and start carrying it around. And also consider using a strap. When you're talking about your safety, getting up to the roof safely, you want to have a strap on your saw so you can easily carry them up and down your ladders. Aerial ladders. One of the big concerns with roof ventilation and, today's modern construction is, can we really put firefighters on the roofs? And like I said earlier, you absolutely could, and it could be done safely. However, if you have the opportunity to cut from an aerial ladder, do so. Do so from the basket, or the bucket, Do it from the tip of the aerial ladder. Secure yourself. Give yourself the opportunity to be as safe as you can, but don't be afraid to get off that ladder and onto the roof by using the appropriate safety precautions when needed. We'll talk a little about venting the roof and different types of cuts. We have your traditional 4x4, the modified louver, your TP, your pullback, and also bridging the roof. Those are 5 different types of cuts or tactics that you can utilize on the roof to get the hole open. Personally, I don't care how you do it or what you want to call it. It's when you get up there that you're coordinating, communicating with the engine company, and getting a hole that's big enough, getting a hole open that's big enough, but also communicated with timing with the engine company.
And the key here is, it's great to cut pallets at the firehouse for a training night, but really get with your fire marshals and get with the building department for your town, city, or county. And utilizing vacant structures is the key to getting proficient on the roof. All ventilation skills, especially cutting a roof, they're transient. They leave you. So it's important that you get vacants and you start trying different methods. Okay. The modified louver cut. We're going to go over just one cut. And I worked on a truck company in the city for 12 years. I was the driver. And my main responsibility was to get the roof. So this was the cut I pretty much used on almost every single fire, whether it was a commercial building or a regular fire. It served me well, and it's a modified louver cut. And I'm just going to go through the cuts. It's 7 cuts, and it gets you like a 3x5 instead of a 4x4, but it's fast, it's efficient, and the key, no matter what cut you're making, is make sure you overlap every single one of your cuts so you don't get hung up. And let's just go through the cuts. You're always going to cut farthest away from you first. Okay, so you saw the red line come down. Then you're going to cut across the top, and then you're going to cut in foot margins over back towards you. So now you're back on your roof ladder, and the last cut you're going to make is across the bottom. That puts you lower on the roof ladder, so now you're in the position of safety. And what you'll find is most times the roof panel is either going to louver or it's going to fall in the attic, and it's such a small piece that even if the members are operating inside, you're not going to really do any serious damage to anybody. But it gets you a quick hole quickly, and it also, you don't got to worry about getting off balance on the roof because you don't have to pull the hole. So the thing that I would do different after learning this stuff from UL and this is I would wait for a call for inside or see visible signs of extinguishment or hear on the radio to actually push down the ceiling. All right, scuttles. For the individuals on this webcast, and we're almost done here, so we really thank you for bearing with us here. But scuttles are dangerous. They're heavy. So you want to make sure that when you pop a scuttle, you don't throw it off the roof. The other thing you want to make sure of is if the fire's in the attic, did it start in the basement? All right. Basement fires, attacking it from the inside versus the outside. I think basement fires is another great example of where you can hit it hard from the yard for that 10 seconds before committing to go down the stairs. Just simply break out the window, give it the quick blast, and then make your attack. I personally like attacking basement fires from the outside and going down the Bilco door stairs, then going in from the inside. And here's why. The Bilco door stairs is generally going to be 6 stairs, generally going to be made of concrete. The interior stairs are usually 12 to 13 stairs. They're made of wood, and in New England, in the city I work in, they always turn at the bottom, which makes another kink point. And where does everybody store all of their junk in these homes? Underneath the interior stairs. So it's always safer to attack from the Bilco door stairs. You can get down quicker, and they also terminate along the wall, where the interior stairs may terminate in the middle of the floor. So it puts you in a position of safety. You get down the stairs quicker, and when you go down the stairs, it's a matter of debate for a lot of individuals, but I always teach that you go down the stairs facing the stairs. So this way, if you have to retreat back up the stairs, you're going to be able to retreat up the stairs. Because remember, the most sensitive and vulnerable part of your SCBA and your PPE ensemble is going to be the shield of your face mask and also your hood. So if remember, you're crawling down a chimney. So you want to get down to the bottom as quick as possible. You want to be facing the stairs. You want to get to the stairs quick and then completely finish attacking the fire. You know, if you have to go down the interior stairs because the circumstances dictate it or there's no Bilco door, remember the door you're looking for in the dark is going to be the door that opens towards you. So keep door swing in mind. But also remember that thermal imaging camera may not see the fire that is below you. And make sure this is the perfect opportunity. You always want to stretch into a basement charged. Flake out your hose and prepare for your hose stretch before you go down the stairs. The worst thing you can do is start making an interior stairwell and get caught in the middle of the stairs with not enough line. So you want to pre-deploy your line in that kitchen or in that hallway. Make sure you have enough line that you and your personnel are going to be able to get to the bottom of those stairs quickly. And we see this in every city where someone walks up, it's a basement fire, the crews are stretching down, and somebody just wants to take windows. You take those windows while that crew's going down that stairway, you're going to light the place up, you're going to give that ventilation-induced flashover that we talked about earlier, you're going to raise the temperature, and you're going to kill your members. So remember, is the line charged? And now that there are going to be some times where we used to tell everybody never to throw water on smoke. If that smoke is heated and it's moving and you're making that hallway, you may have to put the water on the smoke to make that main body of fire. We want to make sure that when that line first opens to make that initial push in, that may not be the time to break the windows. You want to make sure they're hitting that main body of fire, whether it's a basement fire or a bedroom fire. So don't go by the way that, okay, they're flowing water, I can take windows. You want to make sure to take windows as close to the main body of fire as possible and then work your way back after they get there. And again, we talked about making that quick blast from outside, but as soon as you make that quick blast, you got to be prepared to make entry and put out the fire. And here is a video from NIST where it's segmented into 4 spaces. And look at the temperature. You'll see that they go in the Bilco door. They're hitting the fire. The door to the upstairs living space is open. There's no temperature increase. And this was one of the things that really surprised me at FDIC, where I was like, wow, because I really thought there would be a high temperature influx, but there wasn't. Take a look. Okay, so as we saw, a quick blast from the basement window did not push fire up to the first floor. Will it raise the temperature a little bit? Yeah, absolutely, but we're not going to push fire with water. So first, I'd like to apologize for somebody that we're only expecting to spend an hour with Frank and I today. We obviously overbuilt this a little bit, but there was tons of solid information that we felt like we had to deliver to you today. So just as a summary and a few final thoughts, a few of the key words you should be focusing in on is coordination and communication, 2 keys within today's fire ground. You also have to consider everything that you do is ventilation, and you have to control the flow path. Also remember, flowing water from the outside is okay. Blitz attack, transitional attack, whatever you want to call it, it is okay. And there are situations where putting water on smoke is also okay, because there are times that you're going to need to take the energy out of that fire before you put your crews or your companies into the flow path. We'd just like to thank Tempest and Fire Engineering for putting on this webcast. And again, we overbuilt this because we were trying to reconcile some different things, and we didn't want to just skimp on things. But we really want to thank Battalion Chief George Healy, who has the keynote speech at FDIC this year, and Steve Kerber, because I kept calling him and bouncing questions off him back and forth. So I'm hoping that this kind of gave you a little bit of the practical application. But the biggest fear I have of this study is people are going to just say, oh, we're just going to hit it from the outside every time. And I think that that's just one tool for the box. And I think that you really, back to what Ted Jarbo used to say, circumstances are going to dictate action. But if we coordinate the fire ground better and we control the energy of the fire, we're still going to be able to make that aggressive fire attack. And we'd like to thank you for joining us today. Peter, do you want to finish this up?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys for all that information. It was really fantastic. We got a couple of questions, but I think we're going to just hold on because we went a little bit over time, and we're going to send them to you guys, and hopefully you guys can answer them via email, if that's cool.
Yeah, we'll get that right out to you. And actually, we've been working with Fire Engineering. We're working on an article on basically breaking down everything we just talked about in an article, and Steve Krober helped us out with it, and so did George Healy. So hopefully they'll be seeing that, and we'll be able to get that out along with the answers to these questions. So we'll be a quick turnaround.
All right. Well, we just want to thank again Frank and PJ for today's presentation. We'd also like to thank Tempest Technology for sponsoring this webcast. You can visit Tempest at www.tempest-edge.com. This presentation will be archived within 24 hours, and you can get it at the homepage on fireengineering.com. A reminder email message for the archive will be sent to everybody who registered. Thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to future webcasts.